Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Underserved, the podcast for the rest of the tech industry. I'm your host, Andrew Gelina. Here with me this week, joining me in studio, is Matt Hodges, VP of Software Engineering at Curriculum Associates. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So not surprisingly, you, like me and 30 million other people, are a member of the Commodore Mafia. How did you get your start and the spark that got you into programming?
Yeah, and the original spark was probably 4 or 5 years before that, just summer school, doing logo during summer school and just getting fascinated with that. At my house, though, my uncle was a Commodore 64 owner. So I ended up having that. Didn't do too much hardcore development on that, but just command line, getting the games going, playing through that. It started kindling the love for computers in general. Through high school, I was fortunate enough that they had offered a Pascal class through junior and senior year, and that really helped me because I feel like looking at programming as a practice, the hardest part is thinking like a programmer. The classic example that I think of from back in the day is there was a question, you have 83 cents. How many quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies is that? And as a typical human being, you could easily say 3 quarters, a nickel, and 3 pennies. But to do that in code, you have to think 3-4 levels down, write all the individual things to sort it out. Getting to that mindset was always the hardest part, starting to think like a programmer for me. So having those classes in high school, it allowed me to get kind of through that obstacle in advance. And then once I knew I was really taking to it, it made it somewhat an easy decision to go into a computer science degree at Stonehill College. It really helped me get ahead of some of the classmates that I took part in comp sci with. My freshman year, there were actually 70 computer science majors. That was right around the dot-com boom. Graduated with 6. So everybody jumped into the industry because it was the hot thing. People wanted to make a lot of money. But then people realized that it's not that easy. It's a different way of thinking.
So it wasn't just attrition of college. It was actually people leaving to go to a .com or something?
No, more people going to different majors. So they would stay at Stonehill, but they would change their majors and realize, all right, maybe computer science was not for me, and switch to a different space.
Yeah, comp sci can be tough. Like right when you start getting to the more advanced algorithms, the compilers course, it starts getting more intimidating.
Yeah, I mean, I was very happy with the education that I was able to get at Stonehill College. So it was a smaller school from a computer science department. But like our junior year, our main project was to build the compiler from scratch. So really just understanding the innards of how compilers work and being able to build something like that really helped me get off onto a good foot once I got into the corporate world.
And so you graduated, and then where'd you start working?
So straight out of college, Stonehill has a really strong alumni network. So fortunately, I was able to get some interviews lined up with Staples. There were some Stonehill alumni there, specifically one who ended up being a mentor of mine. She had interviewed me when I was at Stonehill, and the first thing she said is, your GPA is not all that great, right? At that point, I had to explain how my view of work versus school is kind of different. When I'm paying for something, it's harder for me to push, but when I'm getting paid for something, I work really hard. I had to spin a tale to get past my not-so-great GPA. But she was fortunately able to look past that and gave me an opportunity in the QA space. I had been looking for dev, but I saw QA as an opportunity to get into the industry. I was able to spend about 6 years in QA at Staples. I ended up going into management while I was in the QA space. Staples on the whole, I was really able to get visibility into a lot of different sides of the industry, which I really think I benefited from. So I was in QA for 6 years. I did database, so I oversaw the DB2 instances, MySQL, SQL Server, et cetera, for a couple of years. And then I ended up coming around back to the dev, which is where I ended up wanting to be, in the .com space for my last couple of years at Staples.
Well, it was a good space to be in. Everyone was expanding then.
Yep.
All boats rise when the tide comes in. I think it's kind of an underrated tour of duty to spend some time in QA, in the database group, maybe in the ops group as well, and realizing both what makes those folks tick and what their pain points are and just how to do the job.
Yep. Yeah.
Before getting into dev.
Yeah, I mean, one of my fears starting at QA, and I saw it a little bit when I was at Staples, is sometimes QA can be viewed as almost second-class technical citizens, even though a lot of times QA people will have comp sci degrees. And I was fortunate that I didn't face too much of that. My dev peers were very open to bringing me into the conversation and letting me have a voice. But yeah, it definitely helped. Now that I've been in the dev seat for almost 10 years, it's really given me an appreciation for knowing how QA will look at situations or what the infrastructure team will need or want or be thinking about.
And so from there, now you're at Curriculum Associates. Can you tell us a bit about what they do for our folks who don't know and your role there?
Sure. It's an educational technology company. services K through 8 students. We're just under 8 million students this year, growing at a rapid rate. The one thing that's unique about Curriculum Associates is a lot of companies offer instruction or assessment. iReady, which is the primary Curriculum Associates product, really offers both. So we have a great, robust diagnostic platform, which will then launch students into an instruction path that is tailored to their needs based on what the assessment data provided. Right now, it is K through 8 students, again, rapid growth. My role there is I oversee a fair amount of the dev teams on both the authoring side of the world, but also a lot of student and teacher engagement areas. So when students log in to take their lessons, the entire dashboard experience, my dev team support. And then from the teacher side, there's a whole bunch of different areas on the teacher. The team support about 50% of that functionality as well.
So are the customers like public schools, private schools, mix of both?
Mix of both. It's not so much like we don't typically sell to individual people. There are the one-off cases, but generally it's a district or a school, both public and private.
And it helps teachers give kind of an individualized curriculum to maybe their kids that are more advanced in the class or need a little more help to keep up with the class, or
all the above, frankly. So if you're looking at a typical third grader, they could take that diagnostic assessment, and then we have low, medium, and high ranges as far as like what track they should go on. So even if they're a third grader who needs some assistance in certain areas, our plan will get them along that path. But the intent is that they should be able to use it for the entire classroom.
Oh, cool. While you're there, I'm sure you're exposed to a ton of different frameworks. We've noticed in particular that in education technology, there's a ton of front-end development skill needed, especially with React and other JavaScript frameworks. In fact, at Syrinx have kind of built a practice around providing React development to edtech companies.
Yep.
Why do you think that is, and what makes a framework hot and or successful?
Yeah, I mean, the unfortunate part is I feel like some of what makes it hot nowadays is the fact that it's new, and new doesn't always mean that it's going to be around for a long time. There's always the tempering the expectations, or when working with the team, they may bring something forward, but we'll have to look at how many contributors are there to that framework. When was the last commit to that framework? And really dig at from numerous angles. We were actually legacy. Our lessons were a Flash shop, so very interactive. That obviously went by the wayside, so we had to figure out where to go from there. But specifically, we use React with the Redux framework. The amount of contributors there, it's more widespread than anything else. We've been able to get, with Syrinx's help, a really good developer base there to be working through things. I mean, if you looked 3-4 years ago, we didn't necessarily have a good foundational team. But over the years of just hiring, we've been able to attract devs. If we looked at frameworks other than React, it was hard to find a really good, stable, and reliable set.
The critical mass is very important because you want a long runway, you want a bunch of other people into it so you're not stuck supporting it
Right.
when everyone jumps off that open source raft. In an earlier episode this season, I was talking to Vikas Singhvi, and I was kind of minorly ranting about the hype machine that tends to surround technologies.
Sure.
Like I remember in 2000, some company was sending me XML stickers that you stick on the back of your car, rah, rah, this is going to save and change everything. And, we've seen iterations, and I was kind of digging on the hype machine that surrounds these technologies. And Vikas said, well, actually it's necessary because you only have a certain amount of time to gain critical mass and enough users and supporters and contributors that then it can move itself forward. And it's part of the natural selection process. We need a boom, we need a bust,
Yep.
and we need survivors.
But yeah, there have been times where a dev will maybe come up and say, this framework is so easy to get ramped up on and use, but then to your earlier point, it could be great in that regard, but we don't want to then be the sole contributors to that framework and basically have operational responsibility for it. So there's been times where we've had to really just talk through it and maybe make an audible when some of those hotter frameworks are not so hot anymore.
So when do you decide when to build or buy on something like that? What's the criteria?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we're always considering whether or not we want to long-term support something. What we end up finding a lot of times is we will have specialized use cases, or we will only use a portion of a framework. So as an example, like a product we may have looked at would be like a asset management solution. We may only need 10% of an application. So we may be turned off from having to pay a significant amount for an application where we're only going to use a small slice of that. In those cases as well, sometimes it can be difficult to impossible as far as making enhancements on top of that framework. So usually we'll say, how fluid do we see this application being? If we see needing to make a lot of changes, we probably don't want to be dependent upon an external vendor to do all of those, because we like to kind of control our own timeline. If we have to do a feature, we don't want to have to hope that a vendor could work through something with a certain platform. A lot of times we end up going by because of those cases, but in other cases we will try to do industry standards. So a good case would be like SSO. We're just going to use an OAuth or something like that versus trying to come up with something on our own.
So you mentioned React and Redux earlier. What would you say you really like about it, and what are some of the gotchas people have to watch out for?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, one of the big pieces before we were using the React Redux stack is we would get stuck in the maze of promises in the JavaScript world. So we actually use sagas tied into React and Redux, and that allows us to chain a lot of the actions together, which gets us out of that. We were running into cases where you just kind of get lost in that promise maze and not know when things were going to stop. It was less predictable. So we've been able to gain a lot of structure and predictability by moving to the framework. Outside of that, I'd say it's also just generally the speed to dev. So like once we build these componentized architecture, we can plug and play in many different places. So our teacher dashboard experience, we're able to reuse a lot of the components that we're building all over the place.
So in order to get folks tapping fingers on keyboards and building stuff out of React, you have to do a lot of hiring in a tough market where there's not a ton of engineers and even fewer that are very good at React. So how have you folks kind of gone after that challenge?
Yeah, it's an interesting debate because I feel like there's a split in the hiring community. A lot of people want a developer who, if you gave them any problem, could go up to a whiteboard and just solve it off the top of their head. I almost look at it more from, I need someone who will fit culturally in our environment, because as long as you have a comp sci degree, you have experience in the job. I'm not going to need you to answer every whiteboard problem we have. We have Stack Overflow and all of these avenues just so we don't have to memorize every syntax ever. So generally, I try to hire for personality first and make sure they'll fit with the team. And we can teach you the aspects of our framework to get up to speed. But we found when we go more towards just technical expertise, if they don't jive with the team, it can be difficult, and they don't typically last too long within the environment.
Are your folks mostly on-site, working remote? How do you handle that?
A fair amount of the team is in our office in Billerica, but I mean, we're not opposed if we have someone that we feel like would be a great addition to the team. We do have devs in New York and Arizona and Florida. Not everybody is centrally located. The reality of today is you don't have to necessarily be. So if we feel like you're a good fit, then we can work around the logistical side of things.
Do you guys ever go off the beaten path and work with co-ops or coding boot camps or anything like that?
Yep, we do a regular co-op program where we hire 4 to 6 co-ops per semester. That has proved to be a really great feeder process for us because out of school, we're able to get the devs who are already ramped up in our environment. So we actually get to jump over some of those first 3 to 6 month type things as far as learning the environment. So we heavily use co-ops. We have started to use, just to your point earlier around a really competitive market, we have had some success with boot camps as well, trying to bring in generally more junior devs that have gone through the boot camp. But we've been able to hire a couple devs through boot camps as well.
So once folks are in, and if they're trying to learn or scramble to kind of get up to speed, what are some of the resources that you guys point them to or that you've heard of developers using?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be the online documentation, just generally speaking. In our GitHub repos, we do have fairly robust documentation. We have also signed up LinkedIn Learning, which formerly Lynda. So in the case of we found a dev who we really like, but maybe doesn't have experience in Redux or anything, LinkedIn Learning has a really good capability of giving a guided path. So we could set up a bunch of lessons back to back to back that we want them just to check out to give them a conceptual idea, and then they can get going much easier.
That's cool. So one thing we talked about on the pre-call is that it seems like end user monitoring is harder to find. There's kind of a big gap in it. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I think the struggle for us is just there's so many different use cases we're trying to solve with end user monitoring. And one of the big gaps is a lot of the solutions that we will check out, it doesn't necessarily monitor all traffic. So like the ideal that we hear from our partners are we want to be able to track users and go through like almost a tea leaf type flow where like you could say this one user went through these exact steps to be able to reproduce. If they hit an issue, we can walk through the exact sequence to see what they did. It's proven difficult to try to find someone that can give us both visibility to errors and then also the ability to directly walk the transaction from the point of entry to the point of error. We have a tremendous amount of volume given the students on our platform. So usually just the volume of the transactions are above and beyond what many of the end user monitoring tools are willing to do in any of their packages.
Does the volume ramp down in the summer?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. So I had done e-commerce prior to CA, and that was very much, you got your Black Friday rush, you have your holiday rush, weekends die down a little bit, but education in general, your 9 to 5 are your busiest times. It definitely dies down, but there's some activity overnight. But summers die down. Christmas and spring breaks definitely die down. It's a different cycle. Our big release in the ed tech space is more the BTS release, which is our June, July release prior to the next school year.
Okay. How many different languages do you guys have to support?
They're almost all some aspect of JS. So we have some Vue.js. The lessons that we previously had that were Flash are now Create.js. That was the natural step from Flash. Mm-hmm. And then we have React. So generally speaking, we have about 3. We had some legacy PHP stuff, which is starting to get retired. So we try to limit it to 2 or 3, just to, again, have that common knowledge across the team so we can share across teams and be able to spread out.
And what about internationalization? I imagine, at least in North America, you got English, Spanish, and French.
Spanish has definitely been a big focus for us as we get bigger in Texas, California, a lot of the states that really care about Spanish, and even Florida. We have a big footprint in Florida. Spanish is definitely becoming an important piece. So we actually use I18N for the localization within our applications. Spanish has been the one focus now. With the footprint in Florida, we actually have a lot of French Creole as well, but nothing really beyond that as of right now.
Okay, so you're primarily in the United States then?
Yeah, I mean, there are cases where there may be satellite schools in other countries, but primarily we sell within the U.S.
To find my next job, first, I want to hear about dozens of jobs I am overqualified for.
Someday, I will talk to a recruiter who knows the difference between Java and JavaScript. That will be the one.
Would I mind commuting 3 hours each way each day? Of course not.
All I have to do is go through 5 separate interviews, complete a 10-hour coding exercise, and recite the national anthem backwards? I'm in.
Finding your next consulting gig should not be this difficult. Quite frankly, you deserve better. Syrinx is the consulting company founded and run by software consultants. We get you. Find out why our employees are some of the happiest and best paid consultants in the industry at syrinx.com. That's SYRINX.com. Find a better way today. Syrinx Consulting is a proud sponsor of Underserved, the podcast for the rest of the tech industry.
Then outside of work, what do you do for fun, and where might you apply technology in that fun?
Yeah, so I have 2 kids, 3 and 6 years old, so that does occupy a lot of when I'm outside of work. That is what life is about. I've always been an avid athlete. I like playing different sports, like working out. Any activity that I take part in from the fitness side, I try to introduce technology. So invention of the heart detecting watches like the Apple Watch and everything. A lot of my weightlifting workouts will be based more on where's my heart rate, need to keep it in a certain range, a lot of those HIIT type workout approaches. And even when I managed a softball team in Framingham for many years, and I just set up a website where I'd put the stats up and everybody would monitor that every game. Somewhat unique. People were surprised that someone was willing to set up a website to track softball stats, but try to just introduce technology different ways in my activities.
So when you say softball stats, was it hits or per pitch or
not per pitch, not per pitch. Yeah, it was more at bat. So your average, your slugging, your walks, your RBIs, your runs. The team, as soon as the game would finish, they'd be logging on that night, and I'd be getting texts 10 o'clock that night, did you update the stats yet? Did you update the stats? So what was first a weird thing for everybody, they quickly got hooked onto and couldn't resist looking at it.
Yeah, people like when there's a metric that they can measure, especially if they're best at it.
Yep, exactly. I guess that was my attempt at doing more of the Moneyball in adult men's slow pitch softball, just seeing how I should do the lineup, who should go where based on those numbers.
Was the conclusion that the guy that drank the least number of Coors Lights was...
Yeah, I think it's safe to say there's a direct correlation between those, yes.
Very good. How do you kind of, now that you're managing technologists, how do you kind of keep a rapport going with your developers and kind of let them know hey, I understand what you're doing, I've done what you're doing. How do you manage that?
So frankly, when I'm at work, generally I go to work, I go to meetings, and then I go home. So I do, where I've always loved programming, I do program outside of work. So I will tinker with React and a lot of the frameworks we're using. Having that comp-sci background, I can speak intelligently to the problems regardless of the framework. So I think that helps. I have in my past seen when people don't have that comp-sci background, especially when you're in the solutioning phase, it can be hard for someone without just any programming background to really contribute or earn the team's respect. So I think just the fact that they know I have a development background helps. That being said, I'm also not afraid to ask a seemingly dumb question if there is a gap in my knowledge of certain things. And I think just generally speaking, that vulnerability or willingness to admit that I don't know everything allows us to create a bond as well.
Yeah, I think giving the developers a chance to teach too, and maybe if you're one of the students and appreciate what they're laying down and show that you get something out of it. I think that a lot of developers like being that authority, being able to share something they've learned, especially. Do you have any folks that have kind of nurtured their own libraries or things that they then brought to the rest of the organization? And
not necessarily as far as like an open source product that we leveraged, but there are some who are avid contributors to open source. But yeah, there's definitely a passion around the dev, and they'd like to take ownership of the code that they're writing, which I understand. I find that a lot of the teaching opportunities for them as well is where we have that co-op feeder program. There's opportunities almost every year where we have fresh devs coming in that they can partner with and work with.
We also talked a bit in the pre-call about a coworker recommending a book and a TED Talk were about thanking people.
Yes.
What was that about?
Yeah, so that book was called Thanks 1,000, and one of my peers had recommended that book. The general gist is it's generally speaking about gratitude. The author of this book was drinking a cup of coffee, and then he just thought of all the people who were responsible for bringing him his cup of coffee, not just the barista in the store, but then if you go back to the warehouse that shipped the cups that he was drinking from, or the company that built the warmer or the piece that you put around the cup to prevent your hand from burning, back to even the people who harvested the beans. And what he ended up doing was reaching out to each of those individuals and thanking them for getting him his cup of coffee. And it just really resonated with me from a certain angle because I feel like we don't take enough time out of our day to just express gratitude to both people we work with, people in our lives, etc. So one of my New Year's resolutions was just to appreciate more of what I have in my life. Starting this year, I identified just 50 people, friends, family, coworkers, just people that I was appreciative that they were in my life. And I've started writing snail mail letters to them and sending it out. But just general appreciation, I've been trying to take a lot more time out to be thankful for over the course of this year. And that book was really a big factor in that.
Well, I'm sure anyone who's getting a handwritten note out of the blue probably appreciates it because these days, like, you just don't see it.
Yeah, it just didn't feel the same if I was just shooting someone a text saying, hey, thanks.
You rock.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I haven't talked to you in 12 years, but you rock. Thanks. Yeah, exactly. But I have learned if you haven't talked to someone for like 10 or 12 years and you just randomly ask for someone's mailing address, they usually think you're either a scammer or you're going to send them some type of brochureware and you're trying to get them to buy something. So I've had to craft how I ask people that I haven't talked to in a long time for their home addresses.
At the bottom, I swear I'm not going to sell you vitamins,
yes,
weight loss powder, or anything like that. It's a genuine thank you. So we talked about Thanks 1,000 and a bunch of other subjects. We will include some links in our show notes, and we publish the show notes along with every episode on our website, which we have our new shorter URL. It is underserved.fm. That's underserved.frank and Mary, like FM radio. And we also invite people, if you want to comment on something you heard on Underserved, or are interested in giving us feedback, or are interested in becoming a guest on Underserved, we have an email set up for that. It is underserved@syrinx.com. That's underserved@syrinx.com. That also reminds me, I saw that people are now taking audio podcasts and are putting them on YouTube. Now, one way to do that is to be like Joe Rogan and shoot 3 or more angles of video during your podcast, as well as recording the audio. And then you mix it all together and you release both a video version and an audio version of every podcast. That is a lot of work and expense if you want to do it right. You usually need a dedicated person just dealing with the shooting and cutting and editing of the video. And you couple that with the fact that a lot of people in the tech industry are not really crazy about going on camera. And so we said, you know what? We're only going to record audio for our podcasts. So we just record the audio in the studio. We release the audio podcast. You find it wherever you found this episode and you can listen to it. But then I got an idea. I was researching the poker scandal for the bonus episode we did in season 1. So in that episode, I talked to my guest, Mike Bro, about a scandal where there was a live stream of a poker game at a casino in California. And through people watching the live stream, they figured out that one of the players was actually cheating because he was statistically amazing in his win rate. And he was using the RFID off of the cards that was being read in another room and parroted back to him. So I was watching videos on YouTube about this, and I came across this one video, and it just has a single static image in it. But behind the image, it played the audio of a podcast. And at first I was like, this is silly. Like, YouTube's for video, not just audio with a static image. But then I thought about it some more. And you can actually put an audio podcast on there very easily, and people could listen to it anywhere, in their car, while walking, at the desk while they're working, whatever. You could really just use YouTube as an audio delivery mechanism. And you don't have to install anything to listen. You can do it right in a browser. But that being said, most people have the YouTube app on their phone anyway. And then you can make playlists out of all the episodes and make it really easy to engage and listen to everything and binge on it if you want. So YouTube sort of becomes an additional distribution mechanism beyond just using RSS to get the audio podcast out there. So I wanted to let everyone know that Underserved is now available on YouTube as well. For the first few episodes, I made a promo video and then included the actual episode afterward. But for the latter part of the season, I discovered Headliner. So there's a website. The URL is headliner.app. That's headliner.app. And there you can very easily create a video version of your podcast using a WAV or an MP3 file for the audio and an image, like a JPEG. And you don't have to have a video editing program at all. You just upload your artifacts there, and they assemble everything for you and then email you when it's done. And then you upload that MP4 file to YouTube and boom, you're published. So we're going to do this with all of our seasons going forward. At the end of each season, we will re-release the episodes on YouTube kind of one at a time. And that'll also buy us a little time to start recording and spooling up the next season of Underserved. And then just for fun, we also did some bonus videos and we released those under the same channel on YouTube. I just completed one actually that details what it's like to be behind the mic as a guest on Underserved. So be sure to check it out. To find those videos on YouTube, just search for Underserved Podcast on YouTube, or we'll put a link in the description of this podcast episode so you can find everything easily. So Matt, curious, like, how do you decide when, with a given role or skill set or timeline on a project, how do you decide when to use consultants versus full-time folks?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. If it's a really short-term timeline and we just need someone who's a subject matter expert, oftentimes we will go the contractor route just to inject that expertise to be able to hit a deadline. Generally speaking, though, I usually like to staff the team so it's enough to keep the lights on and support general functionality, but then supplement that with contractors. It just gives you the ability to have a more flexible work staff. I've tried to always avoid the model where your entire staff are full-time, just because it kind of locks your hands in case business goes south or anything like that. It just gives you added flexibility with the mix of FTEs and contractors. But yeah, I'd say the biggest use case that we've used is when we just need that injection of real expertise. If we haven't had luck hiring FTEs as well, sometimes we will go the contractor route with the hope of converting down the road, just as far as that expertise and then becoming full-time.
Do you shoot for a certain percentage of headcount, or is it kind of a feel? I know Mark Carberry, a previous guest on Underserved, said he usually shot for 10%.
Yeah, I might be a little higher. Like, if you were to ask me a percent, I'd probably say it's more like 75 FTE, 25% contractor. So a little heavier on the contractor side. But again, it really depends on project workflow for the year, the long or short-term demands. But I'd say generally it's about 75-25.
We've seen a lot of customers who were initially thinking, yeah, let's hire full-time for these, and then 30, 60 days, not being able to bring in enough folks, and now projects are getting delayed. They're like, all right, like, let's bring in consultants who really can't afford to wait anymore on this stuff.
Yep.
It's all about time to value.
Yeah. And I mean, oftentimes if it's a project that's only 6 months, you can justify that and maybe not keeping them further. But if you have a project that you know is 2 or 3 years, that's when we'd say, let's go the contractor route and see if down the road there's a willingness to go full time. But yeah, it depends.
Now, I also ran into you recently at SIM Boston, the Society for Information Management, which I am a new member of, and you have been a member of for a while. Could you tell folks who might be interested what SIM is about and what you've participated in?
Sure. So I was fortunate enough last year, there's a education course tied to SIM called RLF, Regional Leadership Forum. And essentially what that is it's 6 sessions, 2 days each, where you and upwards of 40 other technology managers take part in learning sessions. So we read about 30 books over the course of the year. It breaks down to about a book a week. When you come together during those sessions, there's book facilitations, there's a lot of speakers, CIOs, CTOs in the area, and activities beyond that. So it really just gives you a bigger frame of reference. As part of RLF, when you graduate from that, so I was in the class of 2019, they give you a membership to SIM. So SIM is the longer term, it's been running for years, program in the Boston area. So it's a natural segue once you graduate from RLF to going into SIM. And one of my big motivations for joining RLF was I've always been great as far as networking within the company I work at, but I was never great as far as going to meetups or just like randomly going out and trying to introduce myself beyond my company. And this provided an opportunity to meet a lot of people from a lot of different companies and then extend that even further in SIM.
Well, Matt, thank you very much for joining us today in studio. We appreciate you coming down.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It was a great time.
We'll look forward to talking to you and everyone else again on the next episode of Underserved.